Welcome to the Sacred Emergence Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Wong, and I'm so thrilled that you're here. This is a place where you'll be guided to living your most aligned life so that your truest, most radiant self can emerge. We'll be jamming on topics ranging from spirituality, entrepreneurship, to wellness and lifestyle design, and everything in between that can support you to grow, evolve, and shine, all the while not taking ourselves too seriously. So if you're ready to step into your leadership, break through limiting beliefs, own all of who you are, and expand in abundance, grab yourself your faith cup of tea and let's dive in. Hey, welcome to this week's episode of the Sacred Emergence Podcast. It is Michelle. I wanted to share in this episode something that I found to be really, really awesome from my time in Toronto, spending time with my family. For those of you who don't know, I spent around quite a big chunk of time when I was doing my travels. And crazy enough, just a little side note, last year this time I was in Bali. I just finished my 5-day quarantine in Jakarta and then I flew to Bali. I'd be 2 days in from landing in Bali. How crazy is that? Just a blink of an eye and here I am back in Seattle in a new apartment. It's just so crazy. It doesn't even feel like it was a year ago. It really felt like maybe it was 5 months ago that I was still on my travel journeys. But anyways, I spent the last leg of my adventures spending time with family. And I think the biggest, I didn't really know when I was going home. I didn't know, really, I was spending time with family. And I had not been back in over 6 years. And so I felt this is the right time to spend time with my parents, And at the same time, I'm such an independent person. I really love to have my own space. And so what I wanted to share in this episode is just what came out of it. And one thing that I did that really helped me feel closer to family and also just helped me understand my parents more. My parents are immigrants, and I am raised, in North America. So there's, a cultural difference in how I see the world because I was raised differently. My exposure is different. And also, they all say, there's a generation gap, you know what I mean? So there's probably that as well. But me being an independent person, I left home for school. I left Canada and I went down to the States to study university. About 18, right? The typical age that you go to university. And then I stayed afterwards, right? I got a job out in Seattle and then I planted myself here pretty much. And so my dad always said, you left home at a really young age. Although funnily enough, my dad left home when he was at a young age too. So it was not that different for me. But I think he understands when children leave home at a younger age, there's, for myself, I'm independent. I can figure things out on my own. And it does create a small disconnect between me and my family because I don't see them that often. And like I shared, the last time I was back in Toronto was 6 years. And then the last time I saw my family in person was 4 years ago. And so, yes. And then there's also, the pandemic that also affected the duration, right? But all that to say is me being on my own, independent, I actually really appreciate having my own space. I appreciate my independence. So me going back to spending time with family, it was a little bit of a shift. There was an adjustment and sometimes there's a little bit of butting heads. And there was something really amazing that came out of it, an argument with. But anyway, one of the things that really, really helped, I think, connect me closer with my parents is seeing things from their perspective. And for me, what I found the best way of doing that is by asking my parents their experiences, asking them to share their stories. And I kept doing that when I was home. I kept out of the blue. It wasn't I sat my parents down. I was hey, tell me a story about this. But it was literally when I was in the car with just my dad, I'm Dad, tell me about when you first came to Canada, how that was for you. Or what made you decide to come to Canada? And then I'd ask my mom the same. I just kept asking questions and I just wanted to just get a better idea of what their life was like before I was born, and all the things. And it was just so eye-opening. And I learned things that I never knew before. Like there was just all these little nuances and them sharing their experience, their feelings around certain things. Um, and I was like mind blown. And then I got even more curious and I wanted to understand like my ancestors more. So I wanted to learn about my grandparents. My grandparents on my dad's side is still alive. So it's really cool to, like to have a direct connection. And they're just to have like, oh, that's what happened. And like, this is their experience. And for me, like, I actually don't know my family tree all the way back. Like I met my great grandmother on my dad's side of the family when I was younger, so I do have like a clear memory of her. But other than that, my mom's side of the family, I've met my grandmother on my mom's side of the family. But other than that, like that's as far as the lineage of my memory goes. So I was always curious of like, I wonder what it was like. I wonder who they were. I wonder like just the whole history, the ancestral lineage. And then like I go back and look at photos of like family, and it was just really interesting. My dad can only tell me what he knows, and he's like, I don't even know that much. And so I'm just like consistently like very persistent, a little bit pestering. I'm like, tell me more stories. I want to hear more. I want to hear more about when you were growing up. I want to hear more about this. I want to hear about that. Um, and they would probably like share the same stories, but they'd give like additional information because they just remembered something from that story. And I just felt it like I just saw my parents as not just my parents, but as humans. And I feel like sometimes we can forget that as children when we see our parents, like we just see them as parents, but they have a whole life before we came into the world. And albeit like as an only child, I have a different relationship with my parents. I'm pretty close with them, right? Like growing up, family trips, it was just me and my parents. Even this time around when I was home, we took a road trip to Montreal and Quebec City, just me and my parents, right? So it's a little bit different in dynamics. I'm sure if you're listening and you have siblings, different, right? You have siblings to talk to or to fight with. I had my parents, which is very different. So I felt it really helpful to just hear my parents' stories, and it really made me appreciate them, allowed me to see things from their perspective, and just learn more about my heritage and my culture. It just gave me a better understanding. And it just, at the end of the day, it brought me even closer to my parents. Like, yeah, and that was huge. I feel like that was like probably a big underlying reason without me even knowing. That's what a huge reason of what brought me back home without even knowing it. Maybe it was subconscious, but I'm not saying it was like 100%, no headbutting, but I'm so grateful for my time there. And it was just really amazing to have that time to spend with family that I probably won't be able to take that much time anymore. I guess I could, but honestly, I would love to see other parts of the world. So anyways, I thought I'd share that. If you are in any capacity, have a decent relationship, or I know like family dynamics are so tricky, and obviously I'm speaking from my experience, and I know that different people might not even be speaking with family anymore, or like from past traumas. So I know that I'm incredibly lucky to be raised in a dynamic where both my parents love me unconditionally. So I'm speaking from a place of, well, from a place of like, if you're in a situation where you still talk to your parents, so maybe like it's like the relationship might be a little bit bumpy, but you still have a relationship with them. You would go visit them during the holidays, and all of that. If it's at that level, then I do encourage, like if you don't already do, to ask questions about who they are in terms of who they were growing up, or just to if it's safe, if it's safe, and if it was safe for them to share, obviously. I know that for me, it really allowed me to just to be closer, because I just was so empathetic to some of their stories. And, one of the things is like, we cannot change our parents. We cannot change anybody. We can only change our own perspective and just deepen our own understanding and adjust our own behaviors. And that was something that, even for me now, like, I speak to my parents quite often, we'll FaceTime, whatever. And it just, I don't know. I feel like the connection now is way stronger than even before I went back home. Like, when we FaceTimed and stuff, it was very different compared to now. And that is, honestly, it's priceless. I would not change that or trade that for anything, right? So anyways, I thought I'd share that. If this has resonated with you, please take it and run with it. Ask your parents, family, whoever for their stories. And at the end of the day, stories tie us closer together, or at least it gives us a deeper understanding and gives us more compassion to what people go through, and releases judgment and allows us to see things from a different angle. So anyways, that is what I have for you today. Short and sweet. Have a beautiful, beautiful week wherever you are listening to this, and I'll see you soon. Cheers. To help you feel more supported and nourished in your body and nervous system, you're invited to download the free I Am Supported meditation in the show notes. May you feel grounded in who you are as you become the fullest expression of yourself. Thank you for listening to the Sacred Emergence podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and thank you in advance for sharing with those who can benefit. Until next time.